Jared Houghtaling, who's presenting OMOP Waveform Extension, a schema for integrating physiological signals and derived features into the OMOP CDM. Take it away.
All right. Thank you all very much for having me up here today. I'm Jared Houghtaling. I have the honor of presenting this talk about OMOP Waveform Extension on behalf of my co-authors. So many of whom are actually here in the audience today. So Polina, Brian, Manlik, Andrew, Ben, Mike, Tom, and the other Andrew. So let's get going here. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about today, give a little bit of context about the project that I've spent much of my time on the last couple of years, where we are actually testing this extension out. I'll give a little bit of additional context as well about motivations, why we've gone for this extension and what purpose it's serving. Talk a little bit about then waveform data collection, the scenarios, and how kind of the extension fits certain needs and where pieces of metadata or other data are kind of fitting into that. Go into really a high level of key table elements, and then next steps, and I'll spend a little extra time on acknowledgements as well. So hopefully I can get through all of this. Okay, so Bridge to AI, Chorus. So Chorus is a single grand pillar of a much broader project called Bridge to AI, looking at making AI-ready data sets that are multimodal in nature and kind of standardized across multiple sites. So Chorus specifically is 14 sites contributing data, and you see the 5 data components below. So we have EHR data, we have imaging data, telemetry or waveform data, which is what I'm going to talk about today, social determinants of health and GIS data, as well as kind of operational metadata about practice. It's probably thinking, yeah, another OMOP extension, is this just another one that we're going to throw on the pile? I would argue no. So first, continuous time series data or CTS data are diverse, which makes interoperability challenging. This is a problem that we're all well aware of in Odyssey for various reasons. There's lots of ways to record these data. There's lots of file formats and storage formats and motivations for why you would use those, and tons of different devices and manufacturers, right? So there's a need to try to standardize this to do research across sites, and we know the importance of that from the prior talks. And these CTS data are also rich, right? So there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of potential for impact and integration with the other EHR data that we're working with. And specifically, we have large data volumes, and we have the ability to capture really instantaneous responses to particular events. And for the ICU setting, which Chorus is focused on, this is very relevant. So somebody gets an infusion and they're on a continuous monitor, you really can track kind of the effects of that transfusion in real time using these kind of telemetry signals. Okay, so I'm going to kind of break down a little picture. So somebody comes into the ICU, they're placed on a monitor, and that monitor is recording signals, various signals across different channels, right? So you have maybe a 3-lead EKG, you have pulse, you have respiratory rate, all these things. And from an OMOP perspective, some of these things are captured, right? So maybe you have the device itself is registered, maybe you have a Philips monitor registered in your EHR somewhere, maybe the procedure of actually placing the patient on this device is measured somewhere. And in some EHR systems, maybe you have derived output from some of these signals, right? So this is kind of your snapshot view from a typical OMOP perspective. And so what we're proposing is actually a set of 4 tables, one of which is the waveform occurrence, which is this kind of general idea of capturing or recording a continuous time series signal. But then importantly, and this is different than the imaging extension that's recently been published, we need to capture information about each of these channels, because unlike an image, you have different channels that correspond to different measurements, right? So a 3-lead EKG and the data it's capturing is very different than what you're getting from a respiratory rate measurement or these other things. The interpretation is different, how you analyze the data is different, and we need to know about the sampling frequency and all these other relevant parameters in order to analyze them. So the channel metadata is the second table. The third table is a registry table, which really is trying to catalog all of the files associated with this recording. So what files were captured, how many segments, where are they actually living, how can you get to them, which is very critical. And then let's say you're a researcher and you start processing this, and a lot of times what you do is you filter these signals, right? So these signals have a lot of noise, and a lot of times then you filter and create a different representation. And so we can also then capture those filtered representations in this registry, so we don't bog down our features with essentially per second or 10 per second signals of a filtered signal, essentially. And then the final piece is also analogous to the imaging extension, which is our feature table. And this is really any derived features from those signals will land here. And so I've kind of presented this in terms of an EKG, but this, of course, we're applying this as well in Chorus to EEG signals. So looking at neurocritical ICU data from captured from EEGs. And then one thing that we're also testing at Tufts now is wearable devices. So these are physiologic signals that are not necessarily captured in your EHR system, but you are capturing multiple potential channels of information. And what's interesting here is you're looking at influences outside of the health setting, right? And those can be very valuable context for interpreting EHR data. Okay, so key table elements, I've kind of already gone through these. And we'll go from less granular to more granular, but waveform occurrence is essentially the act of recording the waveforms. The registry is keeping track of all the files when they start and end, what you need to do to analyze them. The channel metadata is like what's going on in each channel, like how can I interpret the channel if I'm trying to understand it. And waveform feature is really kind of like a NLP or any of the other feature-based tables. That's going to be loaded with all the different features as you want to derive them. And so the next steps, I've talked at DevCon about this custom vocab builder, so essentially finalizing our semantics and the codes that we need to represent some of these concepts. Then we've already started to roll this out across our 14-site consortium. We've gone through some external review as well of this extension, and then launching an Odyssey working group to expand on the extension and kind of hopefully get it to be more mature and develop it and promote widespread adoption. So please come talk to me if you're interested in this. And then the last bit I'll say is of course, I did not do this alone. There's many people that were involved in this. I want to give a shout out to Jen and Paul who reviewed this, Marty, who was kind of the glue for the team here and then generally at Tufts, everybody in Odyssey together with Eric and the Chorus Consortium, and then my co-authors. I'll spend a little bit of time on Andrew specifically, just while I'm in front of you who knew him well. So Andrew is incredibly gifted as a researcher. He was an amazing networker, very broadly connected, broadly respected, but he was also a very talented speaker. And one of the things I've actually missed the most in the last months, right, is he could kind of wrap you up with this scientific bear hug on calls. His voice just had this amazing tone, and I loved it. I loved being on calls with him. So he was a phenomenal mentor. He was very humble about his impressive accolades, but he was always the first to celebrate my work and my accomplishments. A huge advocate for me and really transformed me from somebody that was kind of on the sidelines of Odyssey to somebody who's now a contributor and a leader in a lot of things in Odyssey. So I cannot thank him enough for that. And if I can leave you with one message, and I know I'm almost out of time here, it would be this. So Andrew cared really deeply about the Odyssey mission, right, of improving health through data. But he also really understood that mission includes the people who are making it happen, right? So improving the lives of those around you. And so the folks in this room, you all come from different backgrounds and you have a lot of different histories and you're in different stages of life and career. But we're all aligned on this goal, right? And so I think it can be difficult to form virtual relationships and kind of, I don't know, all these virtual Zoom meetings, right? But I encourage you to try to do this, to try to essentially make connections and to really reach out to others in the community and check, see how a weekend's going. I think this can go a very long way. Build each other up, engage in the discourse, and essentially explore all of the beautiful collaborations that Odyssey has to offer. So thank you very much for having me up here today, and yeah, looking forward to continuing work on the waveform extension.